The whole reason for electing local boards of education is to provide a voice to the people. The 7 people who are elected to the Joplin R8 Board of Education are there because we expect them to represent us to the best of their abilities. And we also expect to be able to have access to them. That's something that in a representative democracy should go without saying. Unfortunately, if you read the story that I wrote in the Saturday edition of Inside Joplin, our first edition, you know that that's not always the way things work. We had it confirmed that last spring at a meeting of the principals at the administration building at 32nd and Duquesne that Board President Jeff Flowers, accompanied by Board Member Mike Landis, sent the message quite clearly that principals are not to take their problems to the Board of Education. Flowers' exact words were, "You are to deal with this man," referring to Superintendent C.J. Huff. Of course, that failed to answer the question, what if the problem is with this man, C.J. Huff? After I wrote the story, I was rather surprised and amused by one of the people who responded to it, left a comment on our website, and said, of course, that's absolutely right what Mr. Flowers said. No person should address an individual board member. They should only address the board as a whole. Well, maybe in an ideal world, but that's not the way it works when you don't have access to the agenda. And the people in the Joplin R8 School District do not have access to the agenda. If you have ever looked at what it requires to get on the agenda for the Board of Education, you have to let them know in advance, and there's no problem with that. They should be prepared for what's going to come up at a school board meeting. You also have to be talking about a topic that is already on the agenda, and not only that, it has to be a topic that is coming up for a vote. Well, sometimes issues come up that are important, just as important as the things that C.J. Huff and Board of Education President Jeff Flowers think should be on the agenda. Sometimes there are things that people are concerned about that need to be addressed. Oh, it may not make for the kind of infomercial type Board of Education meeting that we see every month on Jet 14, but sometimes representative government is not pretty. Issues need to be discussed. Boards do not have to vote 7-0. There can be disagreement. That's what makes representative democracy work. And unfortunately, at the moment, that is not what we have in the Joplin R8 School District. What we do have going on, though, and I think it's a very welcome development, is we have people who are beginning to get interested in the fact that there is no access to the agenda, and that the people have no access, any real access, to the people whom they have elected on the Board of Education. There is a petition, and I am going to put a link to it on Inside Joplin later this evening, a petition to open up the agenda. I mean, not only should people be allowed to talk about issues that are of importance to them and not be limited to 3 minutes, but people should be allowed to talk about any issue that comes before the board. Yeah, there have to be some rules, no doubt about that, but I have seen successful boards of education functioning in many other communities, and in my years as a newspaper man, I covered more than 1,000 board meetings, but I've seen successful board meetings that take place where they have a time, either at the beginning or somewhere in the middle of the meeting, where the public can come up and address concerns. Yes, there would have to be some limitations on it. Sometimes there are things that are brought up that you can't talk about, such as individual students, things like that. But at the same time, the Joplin R8 Board of Education, just like any government that's elected by the people to represent the people, has to make the agenda available to the people who put them there in the first place. If they don't do that, then don't be surprised if next April we don't see 3 new